Let's set the scene. It's February 24th, 1978. Just a perfectly ordinary Friday night in Northern California. Five close friends are leaving a college basketball game, spirits are high, and they stop for some snacks at a local market. They've got a dependable car, a little cash in their pockets, and they are literally counting down the hours to a Special Olympics basketball tournament they're scheduled to play in the very next morning. I mean, their uniforms are already laid out at home. But they never actually make it home. Instead, this totally normal night completely spirals into one of America's most baffling, most enduring true crime mysteries. Welcome to this explainer on the Yuba County Five.
So, right off the bat, you have to ask yourself, why on earth would anyone abandon a perfectly working car in the freezing dark? A few days after they vanished, their car was found way up in the treacherous Plumas National Forest. We're talking nearly 70 miles in the exact opposite direction of their homes. And here's the kicker. There was absolutely no damage to the vehicle, no sign of a struggle at all. The doors? Unlocked. The keys? Missing. And there was more than enough gas to just drive right back down the mountain. The car wasn't even badly stuck. They could have easily just pushed it out of the shallow snow. Yet, for some reason, 5 adult men stepped out of their only shelter and walked straight into a frozen, pitch-black wilderness.
To even begin to understand this puzzle, we really need to look at who these men were.
Locals affectionately called them the Boys. They were this deeply connected group of friends who met through Gateway Projects, a vocational program for adults with disabilities. They shared this incredible bond, a fierce love for basketball, and, this is absolutely crucial, an intense reliance on strict daily routines. These guys were not wilderness adventurers. They hated the cold, they hated the snow, and they were known to be incredibly cautious. You've got Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling, best friends, practically inseparable. Then there's Ted Waher, super friendly but famously terrified of the dark, and his buddy Jack Hewitt, who was the youngest and really relied heavily on Ted. Now, all 4 of these guys lived with mild intellectual disabilities. And then we have Gary Mathias. Gary was an Army veteran without intellectual disabilities, but he did live with schizophrenia, though it is super important to note here that Gary had been successfully medicated and totally stable for 2 whole years. So they were highly functioning men, sure, but tightly bound by their routines. And that's exactly why their sudden, reckless deviation from their planned route home is just so deeply baffling and tragic.
Let's trace their final known steps. The group left that Chico State game around 10 p.m. A little bit later, around 10:30, they stopped for snacks at Bear's Market. The store clerk actually remembered them, said they were laughing, joking, just in really great spirits, and nobody was following them. But then, instead of driving the easy 1 hour south back to Yuba City, they went completely off course. They drove across a bridge right into unfamiliar, steep, winding mountain terrain. By the next morning, when they didn't show up for their big tournament, their families, who knew exactly how strictly the boys stuck to their schedules, they knew instantly that something was terribly wrong. Which brings us to what investigators found out on that mountain. Now, what's really interesting about this next part is the pristine condition of the car. We're talking about a two-tone 1969 Mercury Montego, and this thing was Jack Madruga's absolute pride and joy. He babied this car. Yet the scene investigators stumbled upon days later totally defied logic. Think about it, this heavy, low-riding American muscle car had supposedly just navigated a tortuously bumpy, unpaved mountain road in pitch darkness. But the undercarriage? Completely pristine. Not a single dent, not a mud stain. This means whoever was driving was either doing so with extreme care, or they knew that road like the back of their hand. And when cops hotwired it, started right up. It wasn't helplessly stuck. But Jack, who, again, loved this car more than anything, supposedly just parked it, took the keys, and the whole group vanished into the snow. It's wild. And this brings us to a really bizarre piece of the puzzle, a guy named Joseph Shones. Shones was a local whose own car had actually gotten stuck on that exact same road that very night, and horribly, he suffered a mild heart attack while trying to push it out. He claimed that while he was stuck up there in the dark, he heard whistling. He said he saw shadowy figures hanging around a mysterious pickup truck in the boys' Montego. But here's the catch. Shones himself freely admitted he was in agonizing pain, he was half-conscious, and he was hallucinating. His story changed a few times, too. Police and locals really doubted his credibility. One detective even called his story straight-up bogus. But unreliable or not, it is an objective fact that he was up on that mountain having a medical emergency on the exact same night. What are the odds?
The story goes cold for a while here, literally.
Heavy winter snow actually halted the search for months. It wasn't until the melting snows of June, we're talking nearly 100 days later, that a group of motorcyclists made a truly horrifying discovery.
About 19 miles away from where the car was abandoned, they stumbled upon a winterized U.S. Forest Service trailer camp, and inside one of those trailers, they found Ted. The details here are heartbreaking. He had lost roughly half his body weight and suffered severe frostbite. Pathologists figured out he didn't die quickly at all. He actually survived inside this freezing trailer for anywhere from 8 to 13 weeks, just waiting. And when they found him, he was heavily bundled under 8 separate bed sheets, tucked in so tightly he couldn't have possibly done it himself with his frostbitten hands. Someone else was there. Someone had been caring for him.
But here is the part that will really make your head spin. Consider the unused survival items found right there in and around that exact trailer. There was an unlocked cabinet holding enough dehydrated meals to feed an army. There was a totally full propane tank sitting outside that could have heated the trailer for weeks. Matches, paperbacks, wooden furniture they easily could have burned for a fire. So why? Why would men literally freeze and starve to death when they were surrounded by ample resources to survive comfortably? It doesn't make sense. Were they just terrified? Was the fear that smoke or a light might give away their position to someone hunting them out there in the dark? Well, evidence inside the trailer did paint a pretty clear picture of exactly who was with Ted. Investigators found 31 empty military C-ration cans tossed outside, and they had been opened with a military-issue P-38 can opener. Now, remember our profiles. Only 2 of these men were Army veterans, Jack Madruga and Gary Mathias. Furthermore, Gary's tennis shoes were actually found left behind inside the trailer, while Ted's larger, sturdier leather boots were missing. This brilliantly illustrates what likely happened. Gary, who had swollen, frostbitten feet by this point, swapped his shoes for Ted's boots. He used his military know-how to open those rations, cared for his friend as long as he could, and eventually swapped footwear to step back outside, presumably to go find help. As for the others, the tragic discovery of the remaining 3 men paints a really grim picture of that initial march up the mountain. Jack Madruga and Bill Sterling were found about 7 miles down the road from the trailer. Jack Hewitt was found just a couple of miles away from them. Tragically, all 3 succumbed to hypothermia right there in the snowpack, long before they could ever reach the shelter of the trailer. And in a detail that just breaks your heart, Jack Madruga's car keys were found right there in his pocket. So that completely shuts down the idea that he surrendered his beloved vehicle to a carjacker before they started walking. He had the keys the whole time.
So, what does this all mean? How do we explain the inexplicable? Let's look objectively at the theories. First up is the wrong turn theory. A lot of folks argue, hey, they simply got lost in the dark. But let's look at the evidence. These men were driving a very familiar route home. To end up where they did, they had to cross a very specific bridge into steep mountain terrain. That sudden change in elevation and scenery should have immediately alerted these highly routine-bound guys that they were way off course. Plus, they had road maps sitting right there in the car. And remember what we said about Jack Madruga? He was an incredibly cautious driver. He was not the type to blindly plunge his prized Montego up a snowy, unpaved mountain path without just doing a U-turn. Okay, next is the psychotic break theory. This one centers entirely on Gary Mathias. Did he maybe suffer a sudden relapse and accidentally lead his friends astray? While his schizophrenia diagnosis does provide a potential catalyst on paper, the evidence we have really contradicts this. Gary was consistently medicated, he hadn't had a major episode in 2 years, and honestly, look at his actions at the trailer. Swapping into warmer boots, methodically opening tough military rations with a P-38 tool, diligently caring for Ted for weeks, those are highly practical, logical survival steps. That doesn't scream chaotic, psychotic break. And honestly, it's really hard to believe that the stubborn, routine-loving Jack Madruga would have just blindly followed irrational orders to abandon his absolute favorite possession in the world. Then, of course, there is the foul play theory. This one suggests that some local bullies maybe attacked the group earlier that night down at the Oroville Dam, possibly even killing Gary right there, and then forcing the remaining guys up the mountain to get rid of them. There's even a guy named Alan Martin who allegedly confessed to doing exactly this before he died of a suspicious overdose. But we have to look at the forensics. Autopsies showed absolutely zero blunt force trauma on the recovered bodies. On top of that, Gary's tennis shoes and that military can opener being at the trailer definitively prove that Gary made it up the mountain alive. He didn't die at the dam. Right now, the most comprehensive explanation experts have is what's known as the snowcat track theory. Walk through this with me. It suggests that some sort of external threat or confrontation, maybe with Shones, maybe with someone else entirely, genuinely spooked the men, making them divert off the highway in a panic. When the car got momentarily stuck in the snow, absolute terror drove them to abandon it. Out there in the pitch black, they probably stumbled upon a firm, packed trail left by a Forest Service snow tap machine just the day before.
To a bunch of guys in street clothes, this smoothly packed artificial path probably looked like a guaranteed, plowed road to a ski lodge or a ranger station. So they walked it. They finally reached the trailer, but that profound fear of whoever or whatever they were running from kept them from doing anything that would draw attention, like lighting a fire or turning on the propane. And that fear ultimately sealed their fate.
But despite all the evidence, all the theories, we are still left with an enduring, unsolved mystery.
Decades of searches, endless forensic analysis, so much speculation. Yet, the freezing dark of the Plumas National Forest has absolutely kept its darkest secrets. The exact trigger that sent these 5 friends rushing up that mountain remains officially unsolved to this day. And what makes this case just so profoundly haunting is one singular, echoing fact. Gary Mathias has never been found. No remains, no clothing, nothing. After caring for his friend Ted until the very end, Gary walked out of that trailer into the whiteout snow, leaving a permanent void in this investigation that his family feels deeply to this very day.
Think about it. These 5 men chose to abandon a warm, running car and march uphill into a deadly blizzard. They chose to freeze in the dark rather than strike a match that could have easily saved their lives. So what did they encounter in the freezing dark that was more terrifying than the mountain itself? Thank you for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning what really happened out there that night.